Hello, hello, hello. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit today about some experiences I went through while listening to our guest speaker professor in my philosophy of religion class. He's actually a different professor of philosophy of religion, but anyways, he was apparently our guest speaker for the day. Anyways, during his lecture, I have never been so inspired to take that many notes. I mean, usually I'm just listening and, attentively gathering my thoughts and hoping to have some sort of response eventually. Usually not until I go home and let everything kind of, get absorbed, and then I can conjugate how I'm going to express myself. But today, he said a lot of things that just made me think deeper about what he was presenting. So, for instance, one of the questions that he asked that first created this deeper thought was, does God exist? Okay. Well, that's the basis of how did we/I get here. Now, when somebody asks you a question like that, there's the one answer that comes to mind, like the most basic answer, the quickest one, the most obvious is what? Your mom and dad. Your mother and father met, they saw each other across the room and it was love at first sight, or they were drunk at a party and they happened to or there's so many different scenarios that could occur. All that matters is mother and father came together and they made you brothers and sisters and so on and so forth. Then you think, okay, and then where did your parents come from? From their parents, and their parents came from their parents, and their parents, so on and so forth. Yada, yada, yada. So that's the general answer that you're going to give initially. And then eventually you're going to get to the bigger picture, which is, what do you mean by God, right? Because how can you answer that without knowing how you would perceive, or how you do perceive, or how you would define God? Okay, so then from there you might say, well, what do you mean by God? As in, God is associated by a particular religion. So, you have God that is based on Judaism, or you have God that's based on Buddhism, which, it's a loose term, I suppose. But some people think, when they think of God in like Judaism, in the Bible, that is strictly what God means to the majority of mankind. Maybe. You know what I mean? It really depends on the culture, maybe, that you're exposed to, or how you've been raised, or who you're surrounded by. All that matters is, what I'm trying to say is that usually when you think of God, it's associated by a specific religion, for the majority of how we've been taught educationally of what God is, okay? So, on a side note, before we get into when my thoughts started going astray into my own little world, I really liked the fact that this professor brought up how him and his buddy were talking about God and what does it really matter on how, a lot of times God is portrayed as being a male, predominantly a white male, okay? So him and his buddy were philosophizing after having a couple of drinks, which he had noted that maybe that wasn't the best thing to do with somebody that isn't into philosophizing, but I really like the train of thought that was created from the whole story of this. Is that he was talking to his buddy and he was saying, well, okay, let's say man is a god. Man is a god. Let's say that God is a man. What does that mean? Does that mean that he has a penis? Well, why would he need to have a penis? He's not procreating. So does that mean that he lacks femininity because he is a man? And, well, men are usually masculine, right? And if he is a man and he has a penis and he lacks femininity, does that say that he isn't as connected with animals because he's not an animal? And why would that be? If God has created all of this, why would he only be a man? And why would he be a white man? Obviously, in the Bible, we're initiated. We know that he would most likely look completely different than how he is portrayed. He'd be darker skinned, he'd have darker features, he would probably have more afro-y curly hair and a really long beard, just based on the area of where everything originated with the Bible. So it's just some interesting how he thought about that, because I've questioned it a lot as a woman, and I previously was a women's studies minor, and it really bothered me how we like to male orientate everything. It just goes on to our patriarchal system, which I'll get into eventually at some point, but I really liked how my professor, who was a man, or the guest speaker, whatever, I liked how he was talking about if he had a penis and if he was a man, why the hell would that matter? I mean, what's he going to do with this penis? He's not going to use it for anything. He's not having sex with anybody. He doesn't need to. He's making people. So why does he need to have a genitalia? And then he started talking about South Park episodes, which I keep hearing references about how incredible South Park is. I have a hard time listening to it because of their voices and how derogatory they can speak. But he was talking about this one episode where I guess God and the devil are talking, and God looks like this really hideous creature, just like combined with all these different animals. And it's never really insinuated that this is God, but that's the point of it. And it's so true, because we have no idea what God physically looks, if he even does physically look like anything, yet you see his physical appearance all over the place, just like Mary. But there's no photographs then. We have no idea that this is what these people look like, yet we hold on to that image. And I'm not saying that's bad or good, I'm just saying think about it. Just think about it. Because it's a good thing to think about, because sometimes we don't question general words that we hear all the time. Words that are unfamiliar to us, we like to research further and, look up the definition and use it often so that we can become used to it and kind of question, well, what is this? What does this really mean? How can I compare this? But with words that are so general, that we're so used to, that we've been raised on, we never take a second to really consider what the meaning behind things are. And I think that goes for a lot of our language, especially the English language. I mean, today I just learned on dictionary.com, because that's like my favorite website, that 2012 seniors of America have gotten the worst grades on the SATs, I believe it was. I mean, I'm not really surprised, but I'm kind of bummed, because that's our future generation. And I know that they're smart, it's just they're becoming intelligent in a different aspect. That's a different topic. But I thought that was really great of him to bring up that, what God represents physically and, with his image, why that would really matter us. And if you did look a different way, how that would affect us. Okay, so I got more to get on that later, but to move on, he then went on to talk about how when you talk about God, there's three general ways to think. So you have theism, deism, and pantheism. I never heard of pantheism before, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so when he was talking about theism, this one girl, he asked the class, does anybody have anything to say about this? And there's this one girl in my class who was raised in a religious family, but, spawned off of that. And she was talking about how, I could sit here and say, and lift up her pencil, this is God. And all of a sudden that just sparked this crazy thought of mine. Well, not crazy, I mean, it makes sense to me. And I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can, because I want it to make sense to you. I mean, not like for you to agree with me, but maybe for you to understand how these turn of events just created this train of thought, and to hear your opinion, or maybe, it will open your eyes to something. Because, all right, so God is everything. Theism, it usually attaches a lot of human attributes, right? And God is an active participant in what's going on in our day to day. I mean, He's there judging us and looking out for us. He's condemning us. He's helping us guide the way, answering our prayers. So He's very active. Well, so since God is everything, I just noticed another thing. But anyways, since God is everything, right? Because everything is created from God. So what I started thinking about was, if everything is created from God and God is everything, how come there are people who are very invested in God religiously feel obligated to discriminate against other individuals or gosh, I don't even know, because I know there's so many things that, and this might be a basis of organized religion. I'm not saying that all people who follow God or all religious people are this way at all. That is not at all what I'm implying. This is very, very basic. I'm saying that because God is everything and He created everything. My confusion comes when discrimination occurs is, if He created everything, how are you different from the people that you're discriminating against or judging or disrespecting? Because if God created that and you're a follower of God, why would you ever be opposed to something that is living? I mean, even if it's an inanimate object. I mean, that obviously came from God too, because without humans, they wouldn't have made it. And without humans, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, God created humans and humans create all these inanimate objects. So it goes back to God is everything. He created it. So what I'm confused about is when these people discriminate or, they condemn something or a group of people or a thought or some sort of movement, where do they think that these people came from? If they believe in God and God created everything, then those people have to be from God, right? How did they come here otherwise? And I know, like, maybe some excuses are, from the devil, but so the devil has that much power to create individuals? I mean, call me out if I'm wrong. I don't know, but I kind of assume that he wouldn't, considering God is God. He's the supreme being. So I would highly doubt that the devil could have the same powers as God. But like I said, call me out if I'm wrong or explain to me. Anyways, my point I'm trying to get at is I don't know how people can look down on others or situations or I don't know, really anything that they're against, because that's from the same person that created them. I hope that makes sense to you, because in my head it's like, womp, 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 this is insane. I hope somebody else can, like, converse with me about this. Maybe you know some people who have been really judgmental against other races or sexualities or even other religions. I mean, if you think about it, every religion does believe in a higher supreme being, a God. I mean, that really is what that word means, whether we're talking about from the Bible or not. God is a supreme being, something that, is higher than us and created us and is the creator. So I just wonder sometimes for people who are really deeply rooted in this religious aspect, and maybe even they can tell me if you've ever thought about it in that way. I would just like to understand, I guess, like the mentality and how that flows. I can gather of what I personally think how that happens, but I know that human beings are, with given the right chance, they can think for themselves. And they can consider how maybe the words that you're reading and the way somebody is reading them too can be completely misconstrued and almost manipulative and deceitful. Unfortunately, it's really easy to sway a group of people by using something as profound as the Bible and creating a separation between people that you're actually, if you read word by word, are connected with. That are your brothers and sisters and your neighbors and friends and lovers and mothers. And everything. So I have a lot more to add to that, but I'm just going to leave this part now and see if anything comes of it. Okay? Thanks for listening. Ciao.